The verdict of the National Disciplinary Committee of the ANC, of course, that last ruling there affecting the president of the ANC Youth League, Julius Malema, who will have to vacate the position of president of the ANC Youth League. Of course, he does have 14 days within which to appeal that decision. Well, joining me now is, of course, political analyst Dr. Somadoda Fikeni, who has been following these events and who has been quite close to this process and who has a much better understanding of the rules of the ANC, the conduct of the ANC, the history and practices of that organization. Let's start with the last one, Dr. Fikeni. Julius Malema being asked to vacate the position of president of the ANC Youth League. Of course, he does have room to appeal. What do you think that's going to happen? That's going to do to him?
Well, I think it will send the shock waves around that the maximum sentence that was expected was the one that they pronounced on. We expect his legal team to appeal within 14 days, but at the same time, I think the Youth League leadership will have to make a determination whether they will respect the outcome whilst they are having an appeal or simply mobilize outside the ANC framework.
Well, I mean, judging from certainly what some Youth League members, I mean, when we're preparing for this morning's events, I mean, we went through quite a number of clips from ANC Youth League members who were saying, guilty or not, they are going to support Julius Malema because they do believe that everything he has said is actually what the Youth League mandated him to do and to say.
Well, that will depend on whether the leadership across provinces remains united in supporting him. Then that will pose a political dilemma for the ANC because it would have to institute several disciplinary actions. It will also depend on whether the ANC leadership itself remains united in accepting the verdict or they begin to show some fragmentation where other leaders begin to disagree with the outcome. That in itself again will impose a political challenge to the ANC itself.
Well, I mean, just listening to Derek Hanekom elaborating on how they arrived at the conclusions that they arrived at, do you think that perhaps there are holes that they can punch? In other words, there are holes that people who disagree with what was said with the ruling today, are there holes that they can punch in everything that was said today?
To the extent that ANC for a very long time had allowed discipline to dissipate, the holes that could be punched would be the ones of consistency because Malema was allowed quite a long rope to do exactly the same things of dividing the organization, but when it was against the leadership of ANC leading to Polokwane, it was somehow tolerated in a sense. And again, there are many instances, whether at branch levels, regions, where such ill-disciplined divisions had been allowed. Now ANC will have to work very hard beyond this case to restore discipline across the board, no matter who is there with which constituency. If that consistency is there, over time they may win the battle, but if on one occasion they allow some of these activities to fester, it will be a problem. But the other point which I thought was now alluding to political statement is when he would be saying some of the actions of Malema were threatening the investors, and that in itself might then be disputed because you have different leaders feeling differently on how certain policy decisions are taken. I wish they could have just restrained themselves to the charges without making those statements.
But I mean, it's quite interesting though, because I mean, in certain parts of the ruling, or should I say the rulings, he did allude to the fact that the NGC took a decision that ill discipline can no longer be tolerated, and that whereas before people tended to condemn and did nothing about it afterwards, in other words, to the people who transgressed, that had to come to an end. So to that extent, he does. I mean, the disciplinary committee did sort of cover themselves, didn't they?
Well, watch the space when there was a build-up to the local government elections and the list processes. the number of instances where disruptions, ill discipline, utterances took place. They would then have to go back to those members and discipline them as well, because that took place after the NGC. So that's why I'm saying the issue of consistency will be critical in this instance.
Well, which brings us to the next question. I mean, everybody knows there have been speculation, analysts, fundis, journalists, everybody has been saying, well, this is nothing really but an attempt to really deal with people who may not be towing the sort of line that certain powerful people within the ANC would like them to tow. How much of that would become a factor going forward?
How they handle the suspension and how they handle the appeal and the public utterances which will be there will determine even the road to Mangaung, whether behind the activities and the charges you have more of the political than the ill discipline, or you have more of a discipline than the political. But there's always been a mixture of the two, because in each one of these actions there was always the political leading to Mangaung, leading to the centenary of the ANC. But at the same time, the issue of ill discipline is a fact that has been allowed for some time within the ANC.
But is it really about those who are disciplined and those who are not disciplined, or is it really about who wants who to take what position come Mangaung next year?
It's about the political culture that has been allowed for a long time, trying to sort out elite cleavages within the ANC. And on top of that, it's about how conferences leading to election of leadership have now become so factionalized, fragmented in the process, ill discipline being accepted or condoned. That in itself is a political culture that ANC will have to deal with.